My name is Melissa Carter, and never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be sharing something like this. My life was ordinary, predictable even. I had a stable job, a mortgage, and the usual worries that come with middle age. But what happened to me that day shattered everything I thought I knew about life and death. That morning began like any other. I woke up before dawn, the soft hum of the alarm pulling me from restless sleep. My husband, David, was still snoring lightly beside me, and for a moment I just watched him. We'd been married for nearly 30 years, and though we had our ups and downs, he was my rock. Across the hall, my grandson's bedroom door was slightly ajar. Caleb, just 5 years old, had spent the night with us, curled up with his stuffed bear, his little body rising and falling with each breath. I sighed and slid out of bed, pulling my robe around me as I padded down the hallway to the kitchen. The house smelled like home, wood, coffee, and the faintest trace of lavender from the candle I had forgotten to blow out the night before. I switched on the coffee maker, the rhythmic drip filling the quiet morning. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't a physical feeling, but a deep unease that lingered in the background, like a shadow just beyond my vision. I shook it off. I had a long day ahead and no time for unnecessary anxiety. By 7:30 a.m., I was dressed in my usual work attire, slacks, a blouse, and a cardigan. As I grabbed my keys, David kissed my forehead. "Drive safe, honey," he said. "Always," I replied with a small smile. I backed out of the driveway, merging onto the familiar roads of Columbus, Ohio. The city was waking up. Commuters honking, people rushing into cafes, the distant sound of a siren somewhere in the background. The sky was overcast, heavy with thick clouds that made the morning feel darker than it should have been. The air felt tense. As I drove, my mind wandered. Bills that needed paying. The upcoming holiday season. The doctor's appointment I had been putting off for months. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Lately I had felt exhausted, but I blamed it on work and age. Then out of nowhere, a searing pain tore through my chest. It was unlike anything I had ever felt before. Sharp, relentless, as if an invisible fist had wrapped around my heart and squeezed with merciless force. My breath hitched. My vision blurred. My fingers slackened on the steering wheel. Something was wrong. I gasped, trying to suck in air, but none came. The world around me seemed to slow, cars, buildings, even people walking along the sidewalk. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. A horn blared. My car swerved. And then impact. A violent jolt, metal screeching, glass shattering. My body jerked forward and suddenly everything went silent. The last thing I remembered was the sky above me, gray and endless. Voices echoed in the distance, but they felt far away, like I was hearing them from underwater. My body was there on the pavement, but somehow I wasn't inside it anymore. The moment I realized I was dying, a chilling sense of detachment crept over me. I wasn't in my body anymore, I was above it looking down. I could see everything with horrifying clarity. My car was crumpled against a light pole, the front windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. A woman stood on the sidewalk, hands over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. A man in a dark jacket was on his phone, presumably calling for help. And then there was me. I lay motionless on the cold asphalt, my arms twisted unnaturally at my sides. The paramedics hadn't arrived yet, but I could hear the distant wail of sirens cutting through the morning air. I tried to scream, to move, to do something, but I had no voice, no weight, nothing tethering me to the world I once knew. A suffocating panic gripped me. No, this isn't happening, I tried to tell myself. I wasn't supposed to die today. I had groceries to buy, bills to pay, my grandson's soccer game to attend this weekend. I had plans, a life, and yet here I was watching it all slip away. A terrifying thought struck me. Was this it? Was this how it ended? But before I could make sense of what was happening, I felt something. A force. It wasn't a push or a pull, but a shift, like an unseen current drawing me upward. I wasn't floating by choice. I was being taken. The world below me faded. The voices, the sirens, the chaos. It all dulled, like someone was slowly turning the volume down on reality. Then the fear set in. A different kind of fear. Where am I going? I wanted to cry out, but there was no one to hear me. The higher I drifted, the more the world I knew slipped away. Buildings blurred, colors melted into one another, and soon, there was nothing left but an endless, vast expanse. And then I saw it. A light. Distant at first, a small pinprick in the abyss. But it grew, pulsing, expanding, radiating warmth that I could feel even though I had no body. It was unlike any light I had ever seen. Not harsh or blinding, but welcoming, as if it knew me, as if it had been waiting for me all along. Despite my terror, despite my confusion, I couldn't fight it. The light was pulling me in, and I had no control over it. I wanted to resist, to fight, to claw my way back down to my body, but there was nothing to hold on to, no weight, no gravity, no form. I was drifting, weightless, suspended in something I couldn't understand. No, this isn't right. I'm not supposed to be here. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone. The warmth of the light wrapped around me, pressing in from all sides like an invisible force. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, too much for my mind to comprehend. My thoughts raced. What was happening? Where was I? Was this death? I tried to turn to look back, but there was nothing behind me. The world I had known, the streets of Columbus, my home, my family, was gone. All that remained was an endless, glowing void stretching into infinity. Panic set in. My mind rebelled against the impossibility of it all. I wasn't supposed to die today. I wasn't ready. David, Philip, someone help me. But there was no one to hear me. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone. The light ahead grew brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat, and suddenly I wasn't floating anymore. I was standing. It didn't make sense. 1 second I was lost in the void, and the next I was on solid ground. But what ground? I looked down, but there was no floor beneath me, just more light stretching endlessly in all directions. It was as if I was standing on nothing, yet I wasn't falling. The air around me was thick, almost tangible, filled with something that wasn't quite wine but moved like it. A warmth that wasn't heat but pulsed through me, deeper than my bones, deeper than my soul. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft at first but powerful. It didn't come from around me. It came through me, vibrating in my very essence. It's not your time yet. I froze. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. It wasn't harsh, nor was it comforting. It simply was, as if it had always existed, as if it had always known me. Who's there? I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. The light around me began to shift, swirling, moving like a living thing. Shapes began to form. Shadowy outlines of figures, distant and indistinct. They weren't solid, but they were there, surrounding me, watching. And then I saw him. A figure emerged from the light, stepping forward with a presence so powerful that my entire being trembled. It wasn't just light radiating from him. It was something deeper, something that reached into the very core of my existence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Because I knew. Even before he spoke, even before I saw his face, I knew. I was standing before Jesus. I stood there, frozen, as the figure before me radiated a presence so overwhelming, so powerful, that I felt my entire being tremble. It wasn't just light. It was love, sorrow, peace, and power, all woven into something I couldn't comprehend. And then he looked at me. The moment his eyes met mine, I felt everything. My entire life flashed before me, not in fragments, but in a way that stripped me bare, exposing every thought, every word, every action I had ever taken. It wasn't just the big moments. It was the small ones too. The time I ignored a homeless man on the street, too busy to spare a second glance. The harsh words I had spoken in anger to my husband, words I could never take back. The promises I had broken, the silent resentments I had carried, the times I chose pride over kindness, fear over faith. I saw it all, and there was nowhere to hide. No, please, I whispered, my voice barely audible. But he wasn't judging me, not the way I had feared. There was no condemnation in his eyes, no hatred, no punishment. Only truth. A truth so raw, so unfiltered, that it tore through me like fire. Tears welled in my eyes, burning hot against my skin. My knees buckled and I fell before him, ashamed. I didn't know. I choked out, my hands gripping the nothingness beneath me. I wanted to beg, to explain, to justify, but what could I say? He had seen it all. There were no excuses, no explanations that could erase the selfishness, the complacency, the wasted years. "Melissa." His voice was gentle yet filled with authority, wrapping around me like a force I couldn't escape. I couldn't look at him. I didn't deserve to look at him. I tried. I really did. I sobbed, my shoulders shaking. But I was weak. I was selfish. I let the world pull me away. I thought I had more time. A silence stretched between us, heavy, unrelenting. Then I felt it, his hand reaching toward me. Not in anger, not in rejection, but in something far more painful: forgiveness. "You are not here by accident, Melissa." His words struck something deep within me, a part of me I had long buried beneath distractions, excuses, and the false security of time. "Then why am I here?" I whispered, afraid of the answer. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, the world around us shifted. The radiant light dimmed, and suddenly I was standing somewhere else. A place I had never seen before, yet felt deeply connected to. And that was when he showed me the truth. I stood frozen before him, my entire being unraveling under the weight of his gaze. The overwhelming presence of Jesus wasn't just light, it was truth itself. And that truth stripped me bare, leaving me with nothing to hide behind. The moment his eyes met mine, my entire life played out before me, not in fragments, not like a distant memory, but as if I was living through it all again in an instant. I could feel everything I had ever done, every choice I had made, every word I had spoken. And for the first time I saw who I truly was. I saw every moment I had failed to love when I could have. Every time I had let bitterness take root instead of forgiveness. Every opportunity to be kind that I had ignored. I had spent years thinking of myself as a good person. After all, I had worked hard, provided for my family, never hurt anyone intentionally. But standing here in front of him, I saw the truth. It wasn't just the bad things I had done that mattered, but the good things I had failed to do. My legs gave out and I dropped to my knees, unable to bear the weight of my own failures. I didn't know. I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. Jesus looked at me, and in his eyes there was no hatred, no anger. Just sorrow. A sorrow so deep it pierced my soul. "You knew," he said, not as an accusation, but as a truth that could not be denied. Tears streamed down my face. I had always known. I had felt the small nudges in my heart, the quiet whispers telling me to slow down, to be present, to love better. But I had ignored them. "I thought I had more time," I sobbed. Jesus knelt before me, his presence radiating something more powerful than judgment: forgiveness. Undeserved, unearned, but freely given. "This is why you are here, Melissa," he said. "Not to suffer, but to understand. To see." The space around us shifted, and suddenly, I was no longer in the presence of pure light. Instead, I stood in a vast open expanse, somewhere neither earth nor heaven, a place where divine truths were revealed. The air around me pulsed as if alive, and before me visions began to form. And that was when Jesus showed me the truth about the world, a truth that would change everything I thought I knew. The space around me shifted again, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. If I even had breath in this place. My body, or whatever I was now, felt weightless, yet heavy with something I couldn't describe. It was like I had been holding on to a truth that was just beyond my reach, and now it was being revealed to me. The air thickened, charged with an energy that pulsed around me like a silent drum. I could feel it, not with my skin but with something deeper, something in my soul. And then the visions began. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. I saw a land bathed in golden light, vibrant and alive. It stretched as far as the eye could see, lush, rich, and brimming with something divine. Cities of grandeur stood tall, their structures exuding wisdom and power, not just built from stone but from knowledge, knowledge that had long been buried. And the people, they were strong, not just in body but in spirit. Their eyes carried the weight of something ancient, something powerful. They moved with a certainty, a purpose that I had never seen before. "Where is this?" I whispered. Jesus' voice echoed around me, not just heard but felt. "You know where this is." Part of me did know. Africa. But not the version I had been shown in history books. This was something else, a past erased, rewritten, hidden. Then the vision shifted. The golden light faded, replaced by shadows creeping along the edges. The air grew heavier, and before me I saw chains. People were being taken, forced onto ships. Their cries filled the air, yet something deeper than sorrow clutched my heart, a terrible, suffocating sense of loss. Not just for the people, but for something greater, their identity, their history, their connection to the divine. Jesus spoke again. The world has lied about them. Tears filled my eyes as I saw generation after generation being told they were less than what they were. Their strength stripped away, their knowledge erased, their faith manipulated. Why? I gasped. Jesus turned to me, his expression both sorrowful and resolute. Because those who rule this world fear those who carry divine wisdom. The words cut through me, striking at something so raw, so deeply buried, that I could barely process it. I watched as time moved forward, saw the oppression that was not just physical but spiritual. I saw forces, ones I couldn't name but somehow recognized, working in the shadows, ensuring the truth never surfaced. This isn't just history, I whispered, realization sinking in. This is a battle. Jesus nodded. And the time of revelation has begun. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. I was trembling, my mind struggling to grasp the enormity of what I had just seen. The weight of it crushed me, not just the suffering but the deception, the deliberate erasure of truth. They were meant for more. I whispered, my voice barely audible. Jesus stood beside me, his expression unreadable, his presence unwavering. The sorrow in his eyes was undeniable, but there was something else too: resolve. The oppression was not just physical, he said, his voice carrying through me like an unshakable truth. It was spiritual, because if they knew who they truly were, the world would change. His words sent a shudder through my soul. This wasn't just about the past. This wasn't just about history. This was about now. The vision shifted again, and I saw time moving forward. The chains were gone, but the oppression remained. The world had found new ways to enslave, new ways to silence, new ways to make people forget who they truly were. I saw institutions, systems, ideologies carefully crafted to strip away identity, to disconnect people from their divine power. I saw lies whispered so convincingly that they became accepted as truth. I saw generations being taught to believe they were broken, powerless, unworthy. And then a spark. It was faint at first, barely visible, but as I watched it grew. People were waking up. I saw men and women standing tall, reclaiming what had been stolen. They were breaking through mental chains, shaking off the burden of generations of deception. They were remembering. Jesus smiled, though his eyes still held sorrow. The time of revelation has begun. Tears blurred my vision as I watched the awakening unfold. But with it came something darker: resistance. The forces that had spent centuries keeping the truth buried were fighting back. I saw manipulation, division, distractions designed to keep people from seeing clearly. I saw fear being used as a weapon, keeping people enslaved in their own minds. They won't let this happen easily, I whispered, fear creeping into my voice. Jesus turned to me, his presence steady, unwavering. No, they won't. But they cannot stop it. I swallowed hard. The realization settled deep in my chest. This wasn't just about them. This was about all of us. Why are you showing me this? I asked, my voice trembling. Jesus met my gaze, and the answer sent a jolt through my soul. Because you must tell them. The vision around me began to fade, but the truth I had seen would never leave me. I wasn't the same, and I could never go back. The vision around me began to fade, dissolving into something I couldn't control. The golden light dimmed, the images slipping away like sand through my fingers. No, wait! I cried out, reaching toward the fading truth, desperate to hold on to it. But it was too late. A force pulled me backward, as if I were being yanked away from something sacred. The warmth of Jesus's presence began to slip, the overwhelming love and sorrow retreating into the distance. I don't want to go back, I sobbed, panic clawing at my chest. Jesus watched me, his expression steady but filled with something urgent. You must. My body trembled. My soul trembled. I knew what was waiting for me back there. A world that had no idea what was coming. A world trapped in lies, distractions, and illusions. And I was supposed to go back and speak the truth? They won't believe me, I whispered. They won't listen. Jesus took a step closer, and for a brief moment, I felt his presence wrap around me like an embrace, not with arms but with some will. And that is enough. The warmth vanished. The light around me shattered. And suddenly pain. A sharp, agonizing jolt shot through my body like being struck by lightning. My chest heaved. My lungs burned. I gasped for air, for life, for anything real. Blinding artificial light stabbed into my eyes. Harsh beeping filled my ears. The sterile smell of antiseptic and metal filled my nose. I was back. The hospital room swam into focus. Wires were attached to my arms, a heart monitor beeped rhythmically beside me, and my chest ached with every breath I took. My eyes flew open. Fluorescent light stabbed into my vision, white and unnatural, buzzing faintly overhead. I could feel everything, the weight of my body pressing into the hospital bed, the tightness in my chest, the stinging in my arm. The sharp scent of antiseptic burned my nostrils. Machines beeped, their steady rhythm grounding me in reality. And yet my soul still ached with the weight of what I had seen. I felt something rise within me, something too powerful to contain. And before I even had time to think, before I could stop myself, I shouted, "Jesus is God." The words tore from my throat, raw and absolute. They filled the room, vibrating in my chest, reverberating in my very soul. A sharp gasp sounded beside me. I turned my head, my vision still blurred, my body still trembling from the force of my return. Through the haze I saw David, my husband, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock. His hands still clutching mine, squeezed so hard it almost hurt. "Melissa. Oh my God, you're awake." His voice cracked with emotion. Tears filled his eyes, spilling down his cheeks, but I barely noticed. My mind was still in that other place. The presence of Jesus, the golden light, the truth that had been revealed to me, it was all still there, burned into my very being. I tried to sit up, but a stabbing pain shot through my ribs, forcing me back down. My body was weak, but my soul was roaring. "I saw him." I whispered, my throat raw. My lips trembled. "I saw Jesus. He is real. He is God." David's grip tightened around my fingers, but he said nothing. The look in his eyes said everything. He didn't know what to believe. He didn't know what to say. The door burst open. Nurses and doctors rushed in, their faces shifting between relief and urgency. They moved around me, adjusting monitors, checking my vitals. "Melissa, can you hear me?" a doctor asked, shining a light into my eyes. "Jesus is God," I repeated, my voice quieter now, but just as certain. The doctor exchanged a glance with a nurse. They didn't understand. None of them did. I was back. Back in a world that had no idea what was coming. And I had been sent to tell them. The weight of what I had seen pressed down on me, suffocating and undeniable. I had come back with a mission, to tell the world the truth, but the world didn't want to hear it. From the moment I opened my eyes in that hospital bed and declared, "Jesus is God," I could feel it, the shift in the air, the way people looked at me differently. It started with the doctors and nurses, their polite nods masking thinly veiled skepticism. "You've been through a traumatic experience," the doctor had said, his voice carefully measured. "It's not uncommon for patients to have vivid dreams while unconscious." A dream? A dream doesn't shatter your soul. A dream doesn't leave you with a truth too heavy to bear. But I could see it in their eyes. They had already decided I was confused, delusional. A woman who had died and come back with a fantasy she had convinced herself was real. Even David, my own husband, struggled to understand. He tried, he really did. He held my hand, listened as I poured out everything, every detail, every moment of standing before Jesus. "Melissa," he said gently one evening, sitting beside my hospital bed, "I don't doubt that you saw something. But maybe it was your mind trying to make sense of everything. You almost died. Your brain." "No," I cut him off, my voice firmer than I intended. "I know what I saw. I know what I felt. It was real, David. More real than this." I gestured around the hospital room, my fingers shaking. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. I don't want people to think you've lost your mind." And there it was. The fear. Not mine, his. He was afraid for me. Afraid that if I spoke too loudly, too boldly, people would dismiss me, call me crazy. turned their backs on me. And he was right. When I was discharged and finally returned home, I wasted no time. I started sharing my story. First with close friends and family. The reactions were always the same. A polite nod. An awkward silence. A forced smile. "Wow, that's something," my best friend Laura had said, exchanging a nervous glance with her husband. "Maybe you should, I don't know, write it down? For yourself." For myself? I wasn't meant to keep this to myself. Jesus had sent me back to tell the world. So I turned to the internet. I wrote, I posted, I spoke in small church gatherings, desperate to make people listen. And some did. Some felt the stirring in their souls, the undeniable pull toward the truth. But others fought against it. Strange things began happening. Emails disappeared. Videos were removed. Some people outright mocked me, calling me delusional, a liar. I felt the walls closing in. And that was when I realized this wasn't just resistance. This was spiritual warfare. I continued sharing my testimony, pouring my soul into every word, every video, every post. I didn't care if people mocked me. I didn't care if I lost friends, if my own family distanced themselves from me. Because there were people who were listening. And they weren't just listening, they were feeling it. The messages kept coming, from people who didn't know me, but who somehow knew exactly what I was talking about. I don't understand why, but I feel this in my soul. I've had dreams, visions, of things I can't explain. I've been searching for answers. I've always felt like something was missing in what we were taught. But when I hear you speak, it's like something inside me is waking up. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. The awakening was happening. People all over the world, especially those who had been deceived for generations, were starting to remember who they truly were. It wasn't just about me sharing my experience. It was about connecting the pieces. Historians, theologians, spiritual leaders, even people who had never believed in God before, they were all being drawn to the same revelation. And the more we spoke, the more the resistance grew. I lost count of how many times my videos were taken down, how many times my accounts were suspended for violating guidelines. Emails disappeared. Messages went unanswered. And yet, despite all of it, the message kept spreading. Because this truth, God's truth, could not be stopped. I traveled. I spoke in churches, in small gatherings, in quiet corners of the internet where people were hungry for answers. I met others who had seen things, who had been given glimpses of the spiritual war that was unfolding. People who had suffered, been broken, been told they were nothing, but who were now waking up to the reality of who they were meant to be. "You're not crazy," I told them. "You're not imagining this. The world has lied to you. But God is calling you back to Him." And they listened. They cried. They believed. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was our story. And no matter how hard the enemy tried to silence us, we would never stop speaking the truth. I never thought I would die. I never thought I would leave my body, cross over, and stand before Jesus Himself. But I did. And what He revealed to me changed everything. When I looked into His eyes, I saw my entire life. Every moment, every mistake, every act of love, and every failure to love. I realized that the things I once thought were important, money, status, the worries of everyday life, meant nothing in the grand scheme of eternity. What truly mattered was faith, love, and the purpose God created us for. I was sent back with a mission. Not to live in fear, not to chase the things of this world, but to share the truth. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. And whether we choose to believe or not, our souls are eternal. Now I ask you, if you were in my place, how would you feel? If you stood before Jesus and saw your life through His eyes, would you be proud? Or would you wish you had loved more, forgiven more, followed Him more? This is your chance. God is calling you right now. Will you answer? If you need prayer, leave your prayer request in the comments. I will personally pray for you because I know the power of prayer. And if this message has touched your heart, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's spread this truth together. The time is now.